Hello and welcome to game 194 of Chess.com's Winter Classic Final, played between Leela Chess 0 and Stockfish, who is with the black pieces, and played the French Winawer variation with bishop b4. Black wants to ruin white's queenside structure, but the move is rather dangerous because if that bishop leaves the board, black might get trounced on the dark squares, so he must be very careful. White could prevent the structural weakness on the queen side by defending the knight with knight e2 or bishop d2, but then black could win a pawn with d takes e5. These are also played variations, but the most interesting idea is to actually allow black to double the pawns and give up his bishop. So white plays here e5, and after black's c5 attack on the center, white plays now a3, making sure that black doesn't back out and continues with his plan of taking the knight. Trying to maintain the pin with bishop a5 has also been tried, but white has b4, breaking the pin, and after either c takes on b4 or on d4, white jumps forward with the knight to b5 and threatens nasty stuff with knight d6. So the bishop has to go back and guard d6, and after f4, defending e5, the bishop d7, white can either take the bishop or take on d4 or play knight f3, and white has a good position. Black usually avoids this and after a3 just takes the knight immediately. White recaptures, and now there are many possible moves: knight e7 or queen c7, knight c6. Stockfish chose queen a5, attacking c3. Leela defends with the bishop, and now Stockfish played queen a4, attacking d4 twice. h4. Leela doesn't care if black takes, because after queen g4, attacking g7 but also pinning d4, she will get back the pawn. Black has to defend with king f8, and then white plays bishop d3, defending c2, and after knight c6, knight f3, and white eventually will take on d4 and will be better. After h4, instead of taking on d4, Stockfish played h6, and now queen g4, forcing king f8, and Leela followed it up with rook h3, a very strong move with the deadly threat of rook g3, attacking g7. For example, after a casual knight c6, rook g3, and black has no good moves. After g6 comes h5, attacking it, and after g5 the bishop takes, and after pawn takes, queen takes, black would lose one of these pieces after queen g7. And with that also the game, since the black king would be hunted down like a boar. Rook h3, of course, also prevents queen c2, because after bishop d3, black would be in even bigger trouble after the same rook g3 idea. But after rook h3, Stockfish played knight e7, intending to meet rook g3 with knight f5, attacking and defending in the same time. Leela played queen f4 with the idea of rook f3, and this also meets knight f5 conveniently with g4. After rook f3, the only good way of defending f7 would be with the queen, so it doesn't make sense to grab on c2. It is possible, but not good, because after bishop d3, queen a4, rook f3, the queen can go back to e8, but black lost a lot of time, is undeveloped, and will quite simply go down. Stockfish can't afford to take on c2. He played knight g6, but after queen e3, he went back to e7 since h5 is coming anyway. And we reached an important point in the game because Stockfish decided now to close the center with c4. This prevents the bishop to get to d3, but is also very dangerous. Now he must get something on the queen side quickly before the black king has to face the whole white army on the king side. Leela calmly defends the pawn with the king, knight c6, knight e2, king e8. Stockfish knows what's coming, so he sends the king to the queen side where it will be much safer. g4, here we go. a5, bishop e1. Leela transfers her inactive bad bishop to h4, where it actually will become very useful. King d7, f4, king c7, bishop h4, bishop d7, and now rook h1, making way for the other bishop. Those bishops will be very strong when the king side opens up. Rook e8, bishop h3, king b8, rook f1, preparing f5, knight c8, f5, rook g8, knight f4, making all the pieces work before opening up the position. Knight a7, and now f6. This wouldn't be so great if black could play g6 or g5 safely, but he can't because of the h5 pawn, which guarantees that the position will open up. Knight b5, queen d2, defending c2. Leela is also transferring the king to the safer side. Knight takes on a3 would lose to queen c1. The knight is pinned. So knight c7, king e2, knight b6, king f2, bishop c8. Stockfish is reduced to doing nothing, as often happens. King g2, knight d7, and now Leela finally opens up the f file. Rook takes, knight e2, attacking h6, rook h7, rook f3, preparing to double on the semi-open file, knight b6, king h2, rook h8, and Leela goes back with the rook. The queen also returns home and makes way for the knight on b6. Knight g3, bishop d7, knight e2, king a7, knight back to g3. Leela likes to take her time and allow the opponent to go berserk. Knight b5, bishop f6, attacking the rook but also trapping the other rook on h7. Rook g8, knight e2, anticipating knight a4, rook f4, knight back, knight g3, and after some dance moves performed by the knights, Leela finally got bored and played queen e3, saying, "Fine, take the pawn if you want." But Stockfish didn't take, because that would be dangerous. First of all, if this knight takes, then black loses the knight after a4. And if the other knight takes, then after queen e1, threatening rook f3, b6, defending a5 so that the knight can move, rook f3, and now black has two choices and none of them is good. If knight b5, then black loses the exchange on h7 after queen d2, defending d4, queen f8, c3, and next queen c2, attacking the rook, which will have to go to g7 and then the bishop will take it. And if after rook f3, not knight b5, but rather knight e4, then knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and white exchanged the double c pawn for the more valuable d5 pawn, and is also attacking h7 again. This time though, black can save the rook with two counter-attacking moves. Can you see them? Queen a8 or bishop c6 counterattacks the rook on f3, but white is better anyway. After queen a8, she will avoid the trade and eventually play c3 and queen c2 and win the exchange as before. And if instead bishop c6, then she will take the rook and then put pressure and win f7. Stockfish of course didn't fall for this, and instead of taking on c3, he played queen f8. Bishop f1, and again taking on a3 would lose after queen c1, and one of those knights falls. And there followed a 24-move long psychological battle in which they tried to intimidate each other, and eventually, in this position, Leela decided to take Stockfish's bad bishop, and after another 19 moves in this position, Stockfish offers a queen exchange. Of course, he wants to take on c3. Leela happily gives up c3 because she found a way to unblock the g and h pawns. After queen takes, bishop takes, rook h8, defending h6, king h4, knight takes on c3, a4, knight c7, and here was her idea. Bishop takes on h6. This is how you make your pawns mobile. If rook takes, then rook f7, knight e8, g5, and the pawns are rolling. Stockfish didn't take the bishop, but it doesn't matter because there is no defense against these pawns. He played knight e4, but Leela even gives up her rook. Those pawns are just too strong. Stockfish doesn't want the rook, he goes for the bishop, but now Leela takes the knight. Pawn takes, rook f4, e3, rook e4, knight d5, bishop takes, b5, takes, bishop c1, rook h8, rook b1, king c6, guarding b7, rook e1, rook a8, rook f1, knight c3, rook a1, a4, rook f3. Leela solidifies now her position. Knight b5, c3, a3, rook a2, and she stopped the counterplay. She can focus now again on Harry and Gary. Rook a7, h6, king d5, king h5, rook a5, bishop d2, defending c3, and allowing the rook to come over to attack either the pawn or the knight, defending the pawn. And again, after some more moves, in this position, she finally forced the pawn to advance since knight b5 is not possible. There followed a2, rook b2, knight d5, takes, rook c2. Now, if king d4, then bishop b2 hurts. So king d3, rook d2, king e4, and finally g6. Pawn takes, king takes, rook h8, h7, king d5, king g7, and the rook has to give himself up, either now or one move later. Rook takes, king takes, and in this ending, being up a bishop, Leela of course won after another 154 moves. She just likes to torture. Another great game in which her opponent didn't manage to find active play. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other games. They are also pretty cool. Thanks for watching and see you soon.